Welcome! Today I'll be exploring Canada's Food Guide and discuss ideas that can help Canadians to put that into practice. Hello, my name is Carol Harrison and I'm a registered dietitian and nutrition consultant based out of Toronto. I developed this presentation on behalf of Canada Beef, a client of mine, but I do work for many other farm groups such as the Barley Council of Canada, Egg Farmers of Canada, and the Canadian Produce Marketing Association. Oh, and one more disclosure I'd like to share is that I am an omnivore. I do believe in eating a wide variety of naturally nutrient-rich whole foods as the basis to eating well. So let's start with a quick overview of Canada's Food Guide. It was launched in January 2019 with a focus not only on what to eat, but how to eat. The visual of the guide changed from the previous rainbow graphic to this plate snapshot, showing the proportions of the foods to eat to build a healthy plate. There's also guidance on what to limit, with a focus on sodium, sugar, and saturated fat. The importance of cooking and eating together is also a very important message in this food guide. This is not a radical change from where we used to be with our previous food guide. Both the old guide and the new guide use the healthy plate model for education about combining foods and proportions, with half the plate dedicated to vegetables and fruits, a quarter to whole grains, and 1/4 to protein foods. Well, there are some key changes to note. There's now a protein category, merging the meat and alternatives and the dairy and alternative food groups together. As well, there's still an emphasis on water for hydration, and the term plant-based diet was coined from the Health Canada recommendation to eat plant-based proteins more often. Well, what became of that? Soon, the plant-based became the media's soundbite for healthy eating, with common questions like, do meat and dairy still belong in the guide? Do we need to reduce them? Should we only have a half an egg per serving? So you can see there wasn't a lot of clarity about what the phrase eat plant-based proteins more often really meant. More often than what? Meat? Or simply more often than you currently do? And that term plant-based was called out by many health professionals, like this tweet here by respected cardiologist Dr. Mozafarian. And he said, "Can we stop using the term plant-based diet? A dangerous history of oversimplifying complex food and nutrition issues into magic bullets. Much of what harms refined grains, starches, sugars, trans fats are plant-based, while fish, yogurt, eggs, poultry, cheese are healthy." I think when he says a dangerous history, he might be referring to the low-fat craze from the 90s. At least that's what came to my mind. And there is a danger, let's face it, of plant-based claims getting slapped on everything from cookies to chips. And here's a prime example. One of the main fast food plant-based burgers on the market has 22 ingredients and 11 added nutrients in order to make up the nutritional quality of a single ingredient beef patty. So we really do need to be wary of this greenwashing, claims that we'll find on snack foods and new veggie-based processed foods. And while we're talking about highly processed foods, let's just look at how much Canadians are actually eating. Based on the most recent 2015 Canadian Community Health Survey data as analyzed by Heart and Stroke Canada, highly processed foods like pastries, pizza, and pop account for a whopping 50% of our calories. And when it comes to teens, that number jumps to 57%. So given that, I would say the discussion should really shift from the media narrative of a plant versus animal protein discussion to a discussion about shifting Canadians from a highly processed food diet to a diet that's based on foundational foods, just like we see here in this image. Of course, I would agree 100%. We do want Canadians to eat more plant-based foods, including plant-based proteins, but then the question becomes, what comes off the plate? If we do get 50% of our calories from ultra-processed foods and 5% from fresh red meat, well, it's clear to me this is not an issue about removing animal proteins, arguably very wholesome foods that are naturally nutrient-rich. Well, if you ask me, the eat more plant-based foods message should not be a debate about plant and animal foods. Swapping some walnuts for an egg at breakfast, that's like replacing one healthy choice with another. And if we don't address the ultra-processed food issue, we might just remain overfed and undernourished. Well, I've jumped ahead a bit here, so let's just take a step back and look at my perspective on this protein food group, because I do think Canadians need some more guidance on this topic. All right, so let's consider this. We eat 21 meals a week. There's a lot of room to include a variety of protein choices. And that's a good thing because the foods in the protein group, they're not interchangeable. And one quick reality check here. We can see the meats represented equally along with eggs, fish, dairy, pulses, tofu, chicken, nuts, and seeds. So the idea that the food guide recommends limiting meats is really not true. And hey, a quick reminder here, it's important to include protein foods throughout the day. So try to have some at each meal. A very important reality check for consideration is that protein foods are not created equal. Perhaps more than any other part of the food guide plate, the nutrient package of foods in this group, I think, varies the most. From fatty fish to beans and beef to hemp seeds and milk, they all have unique nutrient contributions to eating well. For example, pulses are rich in fiber and folate, while eggs, fish, and meats have complete quality protein, and meat champions the most bioavailable source of iron. So rather than thinking about which proteins to include and which to limit, why not just enjoy them all and even consider combining them for even greater benefits? Well, of course, that variety and moderation message certainly can get people rolling their eyes, but the concept of food synergy gets at the variety message, I think, in a really cool way that seems to capture the interests of consumers. And I do think it's relevant when we're discussing the plant and animal protein options. So here's two examples. On the left, the fat in egg yolk helps us to absorb more vitamin E and beta carotene from veggies. Cool, huh? And meat on the plate, that helps us to absorb 150% more iron from plant-based foods that contain iron. Let's consider this reality check about how much red meat Canadians eat. Based on the 2015 Community Health Survey data, and that's what the food guide was based on, Canadians eat only 3 red meat meals a week. And that makes up just 5% of our calorie intake. So if 50% of our calories are coming from calorie-rich, nutrient-poor discretionary foods, I would say it's better to look at cutting those calories as opposed to thinking about whether one protein choice is better than another. Really, it shouldn't be an either-or decision. Choose plant and animal protein choices. Oh, and this is really interesting. The calorie cost of protein is another reality check worth looking into. Here we can see how much food you need to eat to get 35 grams of protein, what you would get from a 100-gram portion of beef, which, by the way, is slightly more than a deck of cards. For example, to get 35 grams of protein, you would need to eat 865 calories worth of peanut butter or 245 calories from beef. And have a look at the slide. You can see the calorie cost for the other protein choices as well. Basically, calorie for calorie, animal protein sources are richer in protein than plant sources, with soy and tofu being the exception. Really the take home, I think, for consumers is know that a handful of beans in your lunch salad is not going to cover your protein needs. You want to think 2 fistfuls. And whenever I show this slide to people, I always try to preface it by saying these are all whole, naturally nutrient-rich foods we should be eating more often, but really, there's an important message here about protein density that's relevant, especially for those with smaller appetites. Think seniors or kids, right? Those who are struggling to keep a healthy body weight. And what about pulses? Well, pulses provide just 1% of our calories, so there's a lot of room for growth with these fiber-rich foods. Although there really are barriers to consumption, and these need to be addressed because they're not foods that many Canadians are used to eating on a daily basis. Those food preferences and familiarity, food preparation skills, and meal ideas are often limiting factors. It's important to note as well that similar to beef, including pulses on our plates is associated with eating more vegetables and fruits. Basically, when we eat those foundational foods, we naturally pair them up to make a wholesome meal. And this might surprise you. We know that pulses average 50 to 65% carbohydrates and 20 to 30% protein, so it makes sense that they wouldn't qualify for a protein-rich claim. And how about this reality check on the half your plate recommendation? No surprise here, we have a long way to go. 50% of all age and sex groups, so that's everyone except the 2 to 3-year-olds, had usual intakes less than the recommended servings, with less than 10% of adults reaching their minimums. So, I find myself noticing with this focus on plant versus animal protein discussions, we seem to have lost sight of the importance of amplifying this message to eat more vegetables and fruits. arguably one of the most important ways to improve the diet of Canadians. And you folks have the knowledge and the skills to help Canadians to eat more produce and address those barriers like cost or convenience. If, for example, you could show people tasty ways to use frozen edamame or how to make a quick and easy stir fry. And moving on to that last quarter of the plate, whole grains, well, only 16% of our grain choices were whole grains. So we have a long way to go to make improvements here. Again, you can share your knowledge and skills for buying, storing, and preparing whole grains in tasty ways and offer time-saving shortcuts. Maybe make extra grains on the weekend to use during the busy week ahead. So all in all, Canadians do have a long way to go to reach that Eat Well plate goal, but here are a few ways that you can help them to put it into practice. Variety, as always, in whole grains, fruits and vegetables, and protein foods. Offer meal ideas that showcase a wide variety of foods with interesting combinations. Show people how to prepare wholesome foods that might be less familiar to them. Limit those discretionary foods, the foods you don't see on the plate. Give people examples of better-for-you swaps like a lemon ginger tea instead of a highly sweetened coffee shop beverage. Add Eat Well choices to snack times as well as meals. Canadians love to snack, we know that, so offer strategies to help people make better snacking choices. Things like keeping almonds in their gym bag or stocking their fridge at work with some hard-cooked eggs and ready-to-eat raw veggies. And it's not one or the other in the Eat Well food options. Rather than debating the merits of one whole food over another, I think we really need to focus on helping people to swap those ultra-processed foods for foundational foods. Canadians really need some help investing in eating in versus eating out. For example, we can show people how to cook once and eat twice for nights when they just don't have time to cook or maybe they don't feel like cooking. Try to think about ways to build in convenience in whole food cooking. Teach people healthy shortcuts like maybe 3 ways to make a meal with a fast fry steak, or what can you do with canned beans. And don't assume consumers know basic things like adding frozen veggies or leftover cooked meats to canned soups can really bump up the nutritional value. And let's remember, the food guide is not just about what to eat, but also how to eat. That sit-down knife and fork meal, it's really the better way to go, much better than a grab-and-go meal. We really want to take the time to enjoy our food. That really helps us to have our bodies cue our brains, hey, I'm full. And cooking at home, of course, allows more control over what you eat, both the portions and the ingredients. Really, that knife and fork meal demonstrates more veggies and fruits than a pizza on the run. Enjoy your food. Take time to think about how great that fresh pear tastes or just how satisfying that bite of the burger is. And ask yourself, do you really need to have fries with that? Eat with others to exchange healthy conversations. We tend to eat more slowly and better when a meal is shared with others. So we've really identified here then that many Canadians do need help on most of these food guide recommendations. We certainly have our work cut out for us. Canada Beef has created a healthy plate collection of recipes that helps with those baby steps to encourage Canadians to build their plates with healthy foundational foods, trying new foods enabling plant-based eating, and keeping it all quick, easy, and tasty. You can find these recipes at thinkbeef.ca. I really like that the recipes are for a complete meal, showing people how to put together the entire healthy plate with tasty combinations of foods. And of course, there's a lot of attention paid to making those veggies taste really great and combining a variety of proteins on the plate to get those multiple health benefits. At the end of the day, most people just want to know, what should I make for dinner? So these recipes are super practical in that regard. Thanks for your time listening today. I hope that maybe you learned something new or you've got some new food for thought. And hey, you can find out more about my approach to healthy eating by following me on Twitter or Instagram. You'll find me at Great Meal Ideas.